Who Framed Roger Rabbit is one of the greatest achievements in filmmaking ever put on the big screen. The film is a technological marvel that beautifully integrates 2D animation with live action. The film is the absolute gold standard on not only how to integrate the two styles, but also how to properly do a crossover of many different iconic characters. So many beloved characters were brought together to create this timeless piece of cinema, and at the time, this idea of bringing together all of these iconic characters was seen as absolutely impossible. Heck, even today it's seen as impossible. Take a good look, because this is the only time you will ever see Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny on the big screen together. With such a creative but chaotic sounding idea, it certainly has to take some of the most talented artists in the industry to pull it off successfully.
It was a real leap of faith on Bob Zemeckis' part, and kind of brave on his part when you think back about it, as he was shooting this elaborate Invisible Man movie, and with the trust that his team would pull it off later.
And thankfully, the film had some of the most talented animators and writers on board to make the film as good as we know today. It also had two of the most influential names in the industry on board. With Robert Zemeckis directing and Steven Spielberg producing, it's no surprise the film ended up so good. This type of idea could have easily fallen flat on its face in terms of execution, but instead we got a one-of-a-kind masterpiece that is very fondly remembered today. The film is certainly one of a kind, and no other film has ever matched the quality of its story, characters, and just overall filmmaking in general. It's definitely one of the greatest films of all time and a landmark in technological filmmaking.
What?
I may have gone too far in a few places. So, with all of this being said, times have certainly changed. This film will forever be timeless, but the concept it kickstarted has certainly become very oversaturated in today's world. The idea, the concept I'm talking about is the crossover. Bringing together different beloved characters from different companies has certainly become more and more mainstream as each year passes. We see crossovers of all different kinds of media nowadays, whether it's film crossovers like Marvel Studios, Space Jam, or even Star Wars to a certain degree, to video game crossovers like Super Smash Bros. And multiverses. The concept has arguably become less and less impressive over time. Now, don't get me wrong, the idea of bringing together iconic characters from all different sorts of media is always a very exciting idea. For example, Marvel has built and constructed an impressive career of all their Marvel heroes into one giant film universe. That alone is certainly impressive and a technological marvel on its own. But as time passes and more companies and films introduce crossovers of different kinds, the idea starts to feel more and more bland and less exciting. And in today's very pop culture world, it certainly isn't as impressive as it once was. It's not unbelievable like Who Framed Roger Rabbit is, and nowhere is it more painfully true than Disney's brand new crossover, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. Oh boy. Let me make my intention straight. This video exists to compare and contrast Chip 'n Dale with Roger Rabbit, and how Roger Rabbit is still great and memorable almost 40 years later, and the new Chip 'n Dale film feels like a soulless cash grab that will most likely age in the next couple of years. I mean, for crying out loud, this film didn't even come out that long ago, and I don't really hear anyone talking about it, so that's why I'm covering it. Now, my initial reaction was one of excitement. I absolutely love the cartoon. It's a very fun cartoon filled with a sense of adventure, fun characters, and there's a reason it spawned so much memorabilia and merchandise back in the 90s. It's very memorable, hence why there is a film adaptation of it in the year 2022. But after watching the trailer, I got worried. The film came off as a poor attempt to recreate the magic of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In fact, if you go to the trailers or any positive review of the film, you will see people calling it the new Roger Rabbit.
I disagree strongly!
Now, I try my absolute best to give films the benefit of the doubt and not jump to any conclusions about it before I see it. But the trailer, in my personal opinion, wasn't that good at all. Its jokes were not funny and none of them landed. Like, not even a little bit. But I had the slightest bit of optimism that this film could at least be tolerable. And I'm sorry to say that it just was not a very good movie. The film tries its hardest to emulate the feel and style of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but falls completely flat on its face, to the point where I am starting to think that Disney has no idea as to why Roger Rabbit worked and was so wonderful to begin with. And here's why. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was praised at the time for its incredible scope of bringing together so many iconic and beloved cartoon characters of all time. I'm talking about Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, Woody Woodpecker, Felix the Cat, Daffy Duck, Donald Duck, Snow White, Tweety Bird, to freaking Brer Bear, and Fleischer icons like Betty Boop and Coco the Clown. The film certainly has a dream catalog of characters most people have wanted to see together for years, but most of the characters aren't just there for the sake of adding to this enormous crossover. The film uses its acquired characters in fun and creative ways that further elevate the film's story and overall experience. Robert Zemeckis' vision for the film was to be a respectful tribute to classic American animation, and that's exactly what he did. The film respects the legacy of their characters and in turn gives us fun and clever interactions with them. A great example is Donald Duck and Daffy Duck butting heads while both playing the piano. Not only is it animated with such expression and energy, but each character is animated respectfully from each respective cartoon. Donald Duck feels straight out of his cartoon shorts, and so does Daffy Duck. You can see the two styles of both Disney and Warner Bros. Clash beautifully as it leads to a genuinely funny scene where both characters' personalities play off each other, and in return we get one of the most memorable interactions in the entire film. Now compare this to Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, where each character cameo comes across as the film saying, hey, remember so-and-so character? And I'm sorry, but it doesn't matter how many iconic characters you have. If there's no purpose for having them, then your crossover will be very shallow and lifeless. Let's compare two scenes from both films. The entire Toontown introduction and the convention scene from Chip 'n Dale. Right off the bat, both scenes have a very similar purpose, to show off different cameos and interactions of different characters that we all know.
What the fuck? It's him!
Oh gosh! Yeah, this is how I drive in real life. However, every single cameo in Chip 'n Dale doesn't really have any purpose as to why they're there. The entire scene just comes off as a mindless cameo show for the sake of adding cameos. You will see the live-action Pumbaa, for example, and the whole joke is that it's characters that the actor Seth Rogen voiced. But again, there's no real purpose than this very surface-level meta humor that's everywhere in this film. Like, yes, I remember Ugly Sonic, but he has no real purpose in the film than, characters pointing out how ugly he is. Compare this to Toontown scene. While we do get all sorts of cameos, they all have a purpose, and it's to show the cartoony absurdity of Toontown and the contrast from the live-action city. For example, most characters are used for clever and funny visual gags or comedic moments. They elevate the overall story, world building, and viewing experience to enhance the film. You have very funny scenes showing characters' personalities. Each cameo furthers the experience in fun and unique ways. Seeing Bob Hoskins interact with the cartoon world is what makes this entire sequence so great. His whole entire point of coming in Toontown is to find Jessica Rabbit, but the amount of time it takes for him to just find her is all part of the fun. Droopy being an elevator operator is funny in the context of Droopy's character. Seeing Tweety Bird be so unnecessarily cruel to Eddie, like they have some sort of history together, once again is funny because it adds to the film's story, with Eddie's past with Toons and his mistrust of them. Mickey and Bugs scene is again very funny and a fun interaction with all three characters. It leads to a perfect punchline, and seeing Mickey Mouse encourage Bugs' behavior will always be my favorite interaction in this entire film. It's a scene straight out of a classic Bugs Bunny cartoon. Toontown also feels like a town, with cartoon logic that applies to Eddie even though he is, live action. Chip 'n Dale doesn't really have any cartoon logic besides like one funny scene. Chip 'n Dale's references are just there for no reason than to say, look guys, we added My Little Pony, isn't that exciting? Look guys, we added He-Man and Skeletor, remember them? Hey guys, look, we added Ahsoka Tano, remember The storytelling is far better and more subtle in Roger Rabbit than it is in Chip 'n Dale. The story in Roger Rabbit is adult, yet childish in a good way. It's easy to understand and keeps you invested with its memorable characters, clever dialogue, emotional impact, fun twists and turns, and clever visuals. The film doesn't exist just to spit references. The film had an interesting story with interesting characters, and you genuinely get to know and care for Roger Rabbit, Eddie, Jessica Rabbit, and so many more. Chip and Dale's story seems to only exist to further have references to things we like. Chip and Dale themselves have some moments of character building, but it isn't enough to keep the viewer fully invested with their characters, because most of the time the movie's too occupied with telling a bad joke that they will acknowledge as bad or putting another character you remember on screen. The tone of the films are vastly different in quality as well. Roger Rabbit maintains an imaginative and vibrant tone in the spirit of a cartoon, but keeps a very adult and noir feel that makes the film unique and full of life. The film is mostly more adult, but that keeps the story focused and interesting through its entire runtime. There's themes of race, equality, trust, and companionship. Eddie starts off the film despising Toons because of how the death of his brother was caused by one, but with working together with Roger, at the end of the film, he comes around and has a newfound respect for them.
If a Toon killed my brother, I'd hate me too.
Come on, don't cry. I don't hate you.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
It's a beautiful message kept in the same spirit of the original novel the film was based on. Chip and Dale feels very safe and unchallenged in its tone. There are way too many jokes that just distract from the story that we're supposed to be there to see. The film has a very safe tone like every other safe live-action adaptation. And the film feels too scared to bring up actual interesting themes, but it has surface-level ones to keep the audience as interested as possible. Now, the mix of live action and 2D animation is much better integrated in Roger Rabbit than it is in Chip and Dale. In Roger Rabbit, the animation is refined and looks absolutely beautiful when interacting with the real world. In Chip and Dale, it looks very lazy and rushed. Robert Zemeckis had to film every scene twice so that the actors can get a sense as to where the cartoon characters would be in the real world. That's why when you see Eddie interact with Roger, the way he's looking at him and interacting with him feels so natural and real. It's the absolute best integration of live action and 2D that I've seen besides a film like Song of the South. And the filmmakers and animators worked their asses off to make these scenes as believable as possible. Chip and Dale seems like they use a CGI model for the 2D characters and animated and cel-shaded over it. And while it doesn't look god-awful, it's not as convincing as the 2D characters in Roger Rabbit. Each 2D character is animated at a different frame rate too, which I guess is supposed to emulate the feel of the classic show, but it comes off as cheap and very distracting. Peter Pan especially is very noticeable, and some scenes just do not look very good with him in it. The animation in Rescue Rangers is also very lazily done compared to the refined animation of Roger Rabbit. Compare Roger and Chip from both films. In Roger Rabbit's case, the animators certainly were veterans of this style of classic animation. In Chip and Dale's case, I believe that the lack of 2D animation as a whole in recent Disney has led to the animation not being as refined as it once was. This might be speculation, but I think many veterans of 2D animation are most likely retired from the company, so newer animators most likely don't have the experience with drawing and animating 2D characters that they have with animating 3D CGI ones. The music is memorable and beautifully integrated into the story of Roger Rabbit. It captures the 1920 noir style so perfectly, and it feels like you are hearing this genre of music for the very first time. One of my favorite examples of how the film uses its music to further elevate the characters is with Jessica Rabbit's theme. While her introduction shows just who she is perfectly, her theme in general is one of the most memorable pieces of music I've ever heard in a film. It manages to feel somber and sexy at the same time, with an element of mystique. The saxophone, the subtle drums, the hats, the piano, violins, every instrument adds an element of flair and mystery to the character. The change to a more intimidating violins, and then a switch back to its chill and jazzy vibe perfectly captures who Jessica Rabbit is as a character. And you will start off not really knowing whether or not to trust her, and that's what makes her so interesting. She's very mysterious throughout the entire film, and you start to slowly unravel just who she is as a person. And that's what makes her so memorable. In Chip and Dale, the music feels very generic, and I don't really remember any music from the film as of recording this. It doesn't mesh well with what's happening on screen. The film has no memorable music besides Peter Pan's theme. Chip and Dale relies on references of their music as opposed to the creativity and genius of Roger Rabbit's score in terms of elevating the film's story. It could have played the theme song at any key points in the film, but for the most part, the music is very forgettable in my opinion. I don't want this comparison to be overly negative, so let's look at how to properly elevate a scene with music. There isn't a better example of how to perfectly integrate a composer's score with the scene so perfectly than Valiant and Valiant in the film. I will let this beautiful scene speak for itself, but for some quick context, we see that the character of Eddie, a washed-up private investigator, a man whose best times are certainly past him, and someone who hates Toons and is very wary on trusting anyone nowadays, goes into his old office and reminisces about the good old days. He's reminiscing about all these beautiful moments that he had with his brother, and it is here where we get a glimpse as to who Eddie truly is, and a visual history of his life.
What happened? Did the programmers pass out?
Now, I want to go into some positive aspects of Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, because I didn't have an awful time that I might have made it seem with this review. Believe it or not, there were some aspects that I really enjoyed and I wish they expanded upon more. The concept of cartoon characters being stolen and sold into the black market of bootlegs I thought was pretty funny. While I thought Ugly Sonic kind of overstayed his welcome a bit, the idea of him being a delusional struggling actor was actually pretty entertaining to watch, and I enjoyed it for the most part. Overall, I just wish this film could stand on its own two legs without all the mindless references. Overall, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers isn't the worst film ever made, but it's still pretty bad, especially compared to the film it was so desperately trying to emulate. If it wanted to take a page out of Roger Rabbit's book, they should have just done a full-on Rescue Rangers revival. I don't see why it's too late for Disney to just go full 2D animation and deliver us a film in the spirit of the original cartoon. Make it a fun, full-on revival and remind everyone why we all cherish and fondly remember Rescue Rangers to begin with. Overall, I recommend you check out this film if you haven't yourself, and please come to your own conclusions about it. But if you want a film that cleverly integrates a bunch of iconic cartoon characters in an interesting way, then please check out Who Framed Roger Rabbit. This film still holds up so strong today. I would love to go into a full-depth analysis of this film sometime in the future, because it's still a gold standard of how to deliver a good crossover story. Disney should go back and study the film, all things considered, because in a day and age of countless crossovers popping up more and more each year, it's beautiful that a humble story of a cartoon rabbit and a private investigator can still be enjoyed and fondly remembered even years after its release. This film is certainly unique, but above all, it's truly timeless, and there will never be another film like it.